So we just got it now. Jalen Hurts has been listed as doubtful. Again, that does not mean he's out. It's probably 80% that he's out for Sunday. Probably be a game time decision. I think it's right what they did all week. They made the Saints have to game plan two different styles. RPO, drop back. My friend John McMullen, who was in the locker room yesterday, could give us a little bit more. Is that right, John? It looks like now that Jalen Hurts has been listed as doubtful. In your opinion, does he play on Sunday, you think?
No, he's not playing. There's no NFL players been listed as doubtful this year that has played on game day. So, yeah, it was a little bit of a dog and pony show this week here with the Eagles. You know, it was funny. Yesterday's practice was at Lincoln Financial Field because the practice fields were kind of frozen over. So, you know, they ushered all the reporters in for the 20 minutes of practice, and they made a big to-do. Oh, there's Jalen. Go take some pictures. Go take some videos, as you mentioned, to get the Saints thinking that maybe he would potentially play. Yeah, I never thought he was going to play, and that's the way it's going to end up. But, it's a 2 to 3 week injury, grade 2 SC joint sprain, and that's what it's going to end up. If they need him to play in week 18, I think he'll be ready to play in week 18. But the hope is you clinch everything before then, and he gets a couple more weeks to rest that shoulder joint, which would be the best case scenario for the Eagles. So doesn't make sense to push him on the field against not a bad team, but certainly not a good team. But where, I think the Eagles take this stuff too far, this competitive advantage stuff, Dan, because look, if you're prepared for Jalen Hurts, you're prepared for Gardner Minshew. They're preparing for Jalen Hurts anyway. And then it's not like there's this, movement-based quarterback, this unique quarterback versus, stand in the pocket, statuesque, Mike Glennon type. Gardner Minshew, they basically run the same offense with Gardner Minshew, who has some mobility as well. He just doesn't have nearly as much. So the Eagles are still a zone read-based team. They ran a ton of it. Now, they run just more traditional inside zone, which is a handoff for Miles Sanders, but they're just not as effective at it. So it's not like there's this massive change from this unique skill set to this completely different one. So I don't know why the Eagles act the way they act, but they do.
John, does this make this move here, does this make this game more of a fist fight then on Sunday? That, again, I think he's going to be better, Minshew, because, again, he had a game in now, more reps this week, more opportunity to be in that spotlight, to be a starter. I think he'll be even better. I thought he was really good last week.
Yeah, how much better could he be? I thought he was great last week.
Me too. John, 355 coming out of mothballs. Yeah. I thought he was sensational. 2 receivers, over 100 yards against the Cowboys in that kind of environment. I think he's going to be fine, but does this make this more of a fist fight here, in your opinion, like more of a fourth quarter game now that Minshew's in there and the loss of Lane?
Well, the loss of Lane is big. That's an all-pro right tackle, but the Eagles do have, 4 other guys who are really good on the offensive line. And Jack Driscoll is, I think, going to be the way they go. We'll see how they shake that out. They don't want to give that away either, but I think that would be the heavy betting favorite. And he's a capable player. He's not going to be Lane Johnson. So it affects you somewhat. But I just don't think the Saints are dynamic enough to keep up with the Eagles, even with Gardner Minshew. The Eagles are 13-2. The 2 losses, what do they have in common? They turned it over 4 times in both losses. You take those, it doesn't have to be 0. if the Eagles turn it over once or twice in doubt, they win the football game. And I look at those turnovers and I say, well, the Miles Sanders fumbles obviously not Gardner's fault. The mesh point, it's on his record because that's how the NFL compiles statistics. And, I forget his name. There's a famous old British politician who said, there's lies and more lies, and then there's statistics. You can make any statistic malleable, and that's a perfect example of it. And then you look at the 2 interceptions. They weren't great throws. So I've said all week, I'm not taking any culpability away from Gardner Minshew. But your receiver, and it was Quez Watkins both times, he's got to fight for that football. And even if he has to turn into a defensive back, it's okay if it's incomplete. You just can't let the defender intercept it. So I put more of the culpability on Quez Watkins. Are they going to turn it over 4 times? If they turn it over 4 times, yeah, they're going to be in a dogfight. If they play in a clean game, they're going to win by double digits.
Churchill, I think, is the guy that you're quoting there.
No, not Churchill. It was somebody.
Was it
before.
Chamberlain?
No, way before. Way before.
Let me go here now. John, let me throw this at you. And I threw this at Barrett yesterday. Let me give you – I know that they've taken on Aaron Rodgers this year, and I'm talking Jonathan Gannon. How come every single time Jonathan Gannon plays against a so-called elite guy? Last week, Dak Prescott was 77% completion percentage. Last year when they took on better quarterbacks, I mean, Derek Carr, who just got sat down, was at 80% or 90%, whatever it was. Do you think this defense is schemed up enough against those big-time type quarterbacks who can throw and who understand the game? Because every time he goes against guys like that, and I'm not calling Dak elite, but boy, he sure looked elite after that pick 6 yesterday. He went 19 for 19 after that pick 6. Every time they take on good quarterbacks, these guys have career completion percentage games against that Eagle defense. It's that bend but don't break. It's the big zones. They believe that the other team will make a mistake inside of a drive. That's the new trend, John.
Yeah, everybody
we think you're going to make a mistake in a 10-play drive. So, again, I mean, give me your thoughts on how that looks when it comes to those big quarterbacks.
Well, it's similar to what I just said about statistics. I mean, last season they had a big problem. There's no question. They also didn't have Haason, Reddick, and James Bradbury and Kaiser White, and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, who's injured now. But all the additions that they've made on the defensive side of the football. So I put last year and this year aside. It's a different defense. You mentioned the style of defense they play, which is, I say it all the time, it's the Vic Fangio inspired scheme that probably 12 teams in the NFL run right now. It's in vogue like the cover 2 was when Tony Dungy had it in Tampa, cover 3 when Pete Carroll and Dan Quinn and those guys did it in Seattle. This is the new defense that everybody runs. Couple things with that. You have a tipping point at a certain point. It happened to the cover 2. It happens to the cover 3 stuff. Too many people play it. You have an adjustment from offenses. So all I can say about the Eagles to this point, they didn't play well against Dallas. They're the number 2 ranked defense in the NFL, the number 1 ranked passing defense, even after the performance in Dallas. So contextually, they do it better than anybody else. Now, you talk about the Cowboys game. They didn't play well. They played poorly. Lack of execution. You look at the 3rd and 30. Nothing wrong with the call. They're playing Tampa 2. It was Tampa 2 sink that instead of the safety, the nickel corner had to roll back and get over the top. He didn't do it. It's a lack of execution. If you do it properly, you're off the field. Nobody's talking about it. But here's where, if you want to criticize Jonathan Gannon, here's where you criticize Jonathan Gannon. And I know a lot of people want to criticize him. So They can take notes. Chauncey's not on the field, hasn't been on the field. Reed Blankenship is on the field. Avonte Maddox wasn't on the field. He got hurt. It was Josiah Scott. You can't ask guys like that to do what you ask CJ and Avonte to do. So maybe you simplify things. Instead of spinning off to cover 2, cover 4, cover 6, cover 8, all these different zones they run, the Fangio-inspired stuff, it's 3rd and 30. Just play cover 2 and get the hell off the field. Traditional cover 2, get off the field with young players. Play Jim Schwartz's picket fence, get off the field. Don't play sink, which is essentially, an inverted cover 2 on one side of the field. Don't do that with a guy who's not used to playing. And he wasn't quick. And by the way, the Cowboys caught the Eagles as well with a quick snap. So he wasn't ready to race back to his landmark. That's what happens with younger players or less experienced players. If Avonte Maddox is on the field, we're not talking about it. But he wasn't on the field. And you can't just say, next man up. Oh, he'll do the same thing as Avonte. No, he won't. You got to help him out a little bit.
John, are you concerned with the musical chairs that are being played, especially at the safety position? Because, look, what you just said, just to piggyback on what you're saying here, this plug and play stuff here, moving guys over around, that works in high school and that works in college, but you're eventually going to get caught up because this is the NFL's best players on the planet. There's millionaires on the other side too. So, are you concerned with what they're having to do back there? Because as you go down the depth chart, as you know, John, you go from a superstar to a star to a good player. Are you concerned about it?
No, one of the things is, CJ is going to be back, probably not to the playoffs. Avonte, I don't know. That's sort of indefinite. We don't have all the information. But I do think people look at the injuries. Jalen, most notably, who we started with, he's going to be back, whether it's week 18 or the start of the playoffs. The Eagles have been relatively lucky when it comes to injuries overall, because these are not season-ending injuries for the most part. Lane, we talked about, he's going to try to play through it. We'll see if he can when the playoff starts. And every other team has these injuries. We're talking about New Orleans is coming in. All right. Kamara missed practice all week with a quad, and he had a personal issue. Now he's going to play. Olave's questionable with a hamstring injury. Their injury report is twice as long as the Eagles. It's where we are. That's what happens to every team in week 17. Miles Sanders had a knee brace on this week at practice. He's banged up. That's what happens in the NFL. Dallas has injuries. San Francisco's down to their 3rd quarterback. Minnesota hasn't had their starting center in a month now. Green Bay.
The Cowboys may have lost their center last night.
Yeah, they may have lost their center for the season. That looked bad. I don't know if they gave an update today yet. Green Bay's been decimated on the offensive line. That's one of the reasons they've had a bad season. We'll see if they can finish off their playoff push. It happens everywhere. Everywhere.
A couple last questions here for you, John. I'll tell you one thing about Howie. I got to give him this. He built this team for, I think, this exact situation. I don't think he likes the timing of it when it comes to the end of the season. To me, they've played a lot of ball. They had their bye earlier in the year. They played a lot of football in back-to-back weeks here. But, boy, I'll tell you something, John. To be able to go 3 deep, how many teams do you know, John? You can't go 2 deep at 70% of the positions on the team. Here with the Eagles, you could pretty much go, you could go probably 80% deep into the roster to be able to put functional guys on the field. Boy, this has got to be his greatest roster he's ever put together since he's been in charge of personnel and a general manager. I know there was the broom closet scenario under Chip Kelly, but do you agree with that?
Yeah, this is the most talented team the Eagles have had. This team is far more talented than the Super Bowl team. They're deep. Part of that is having a quarterback who's on his rookie deal, making $1 million a year, playing at a $40 million level. That helps because you can build some of that depth. But yeah, I think, people like Josiah Scott are vilified, right? Because they make mistakes. He's done a pretty good job. He's the
third dude on the roster there. I mean,
Yeah.
What are you expecting him to do?
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know what people expect. You talk now, they have tremendous depth on the offensive line and the defensive line. Now, there are certain other positions they're not as deep. I don't want to see AJ or Devonta go down because that wouldn't look good at the receiver position. But you know what? They've been able, when Dallas Goedert, I thought that was going to be a disaster. And all of a sudden, Jack Stoll kind of holds up. So they've done, and Reed Blankenship has done a heck of a job as an undrafted rookie free agent. So, yeah, I mean, Howie deserves a lot of credit. He's going to be the executive of the year, which is a Sporting News award, but it's not official, but he's going to win that. He should win it. And yeah, he's just made a lot of good decisions. And I think it starts with AJ Brown. When you think about AJ Brown on the offensive side of the ball and Haason Reddick on the defensive side of the ball, difference makers. And that's the one thing they didn't have last year. When you go back to the playoffs in Tampa Bay, they didn't have difference makers. All of a sudden, in one off season, you bring in the Browns and the Reddicks, and then you go down the list to the Bradburys and even the Kaiser Whites, who had a bad game in Dallas, but has been a very good signing overall. They've just done, and even late in the season with Ndamukong Suh, and even more so Linval Joseph, he knows the window is open, and he's doing the right thing, and he's going for it.
John, finally here. I had Tom Thayer on, who played on that 85 Bears team. I thought he was insane when he made the comparisons to the 85 Bears and the 2022 Eagles. But I'm going to throw a stat at you here. And there's no Richard Dents on this team. But do you know at 61 sacks, they're 12 sacks away from the Bears' all-time sack record. I mean, John, if you would have told me that record would be broken. Now, I get there's one more game. I understand that. Okay, there's a Babe Ruth asterisk kind of thing there to that. But still, there's no dent. There's no,
Reddick's, I'm not going to say Reddick's a Hall of Famer, but Reddick is.
Oh, he's outplayed Michael Parsons, John.
I don't know about that.
But, John, every time I watch Michael Parsons, I don't see it. This guy has been sacking the quarterback, and I tell you, I'm wrong. This guy, since they got those two guys in the middle, John, his game has picked up, and he has been like a bullet coming out of a gun, man. Yeah, he has benefited the most, him and Sweat, from those two guys being added to the middle.
Yeah, they're going to break the franchise record for sacks against the Saints. They need 2. Andy's like a statue back there, so they're going to get it. And that's Reggie White, Jerome Brown, Clyde Simmons, that group. And they're going to have the franchise record for sacks. Again, I talk about the depth. Reddick is a tremendous pass rusher. Josh Sweat is one of the most underrated edge rushers in this league.
John, has he proven to you he's a 3-down D lineman now? I questioned that at the beginning of the year, and I thought he was in the middle of the year. I didn't see it. All of a sudden now he's catapulted to. Has he turned into that for you, a 3-down guy?
Yeah, I mean, he was that guy last year. For people that don't know the story of Josh Sweat was, literally one of the top recruits in the entire country coming out of high school. He was a 5-star recruit, and he had a catastrophic knee injury late in his high school career. And that was the concern. He still plays with a brace to this day.
Huh.
The concern was, is he going to hold up? I mean, this thing was it was a Teddy Bridgewater like injury.
Wow.
They were talking
tendons and ligaments and stuff like that. Oh wow.
Just massive damage to the point where it took years to get back. He went to Florida State. He played. They played sort of a different. They played him a 3 technique. He's not. He looks like an edge rusher. He's 6'5". He's tremendously long. And the Eagles took a shot on him in the 4th round, but he's got tremendous skill. And the only question was, do they have to keep him on the pitch count because of the knee? And Josh said about 3 years ago, he said, no, I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm fine, 100%. I'm past it. Probably 2 years ago he said that. And he's proven it. And yeah, he's a 3-down player. And he's a really good player. And people are seeing now, came out of Chesapeake, Virginia, 5-star recruit, one of the top 5 high school recruits in the country. That's the kind of skill level he has, and people are now getting to see it.
John, I want to sneak one last one in on you. You've covered this team for many years, and the wide receivers now with Devonta and with AJ. I mean, there's a chance that you may have, for the first time in the history of the franchise, 100-catch wide receiver. Hell, you may have actually 2, okay? Devonta's at 79, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think AJ's at 80 or 88 or something like that. He's going to break Irving Fryer's record for the most receptions by a wide receiver. He's having a career year. Is this the best duo of wideouts in the era of Jeffrey Lurie owning the team, and maybe in the history of the team? Because you have 2 1,000-yard receivers. You've never had that before.
Yeah, I mean, it's the most talented duo. I mean, when you talk about greatest, you got to talk about longevity, but they've only been together for a short period of time. People go back to Harold Carmichael, Mike Quick. But when Mike got here, he was very young, obviously Harold was at the end of his career. So, Harold was a Hall of Famer, but he wasn't playing like a Hall of Famer. So at the same time, yeah, by far. I mean, the second best would probably be Deshaun Jackson and Jeremy Maclin.
Yeah.
And they're good, but, I mean, talent-wise, undoubtedly, this has not been a franchise steeped in receiving tradition. They haven't had a lot of great receivers. By far the most talented duo they've ever had.
AJ's better than T.O.?
Is he better than T.O.? He's better.
Is he better than that 04 year? This year's 22 season, 04, T.O. had 14 TDs, had 1,200 yards.
I think T.O. at his height was a better player. Again, we're talking about a Hall of Fame player.
Yep.
Talking about
hard to evaluate that. Right.
Yeah. So at his height, but he's such a, I don't want to call him a bad teammate, but he's such a pain in the you-know-what. I'm talking about T.O. AJ is almost weird to the point of, like, he's so good, I expect him to be a diva, but he's not a diva. So you add that to the mix. Way better teammate. And it's not going to be 1 year for AJ Brown. He's going to help you for season over season over season. So from that standpoint, AJ's better for the Eagles. But look, I think there's probably 10 names better than T.O. just from a pure physical receiving standpoint. You got to go to the Randy Mosses of the world, the Jerry Rices of the world. Those are the guys better than T.O. But T.O. played for – how could you be that good and play for as many teams as T.O. did? Well, you saw why.
Yeah, you wear your welcome out.
Yeah, because you're such a pain in the ass. Even though you're that good, people are trying to get rid of you. So
imagine that. You're so good, I hate you.
Yeah. They're trying to get rid of you, whereas AJ is so good, and
yeah,
they're not trying to get rid of him.
Absolutely. John, you have a happy new year, and you're the hardest working guy. By the way, Eagles win, right? Sunday?
Yeah, I think they win pretty easily.
I think they win by 10, right? I don't care if Minshu's in there or
I think double digits, unless they turn it over 4 times.
Yeah, I don't –
then get back to me.
In there. I don't think that's going to be an issue there. Hey, John, happy new year, my friend. Thank you.
Happy New Year. Thanks, Dan.
You bet. That is John McMullen. He was in the locker room yesterday, too, so we're so thankful that he was able to find some time with us. Don't forget, you can catch him on the pregame show and the postgame show on JAKIB Sports on Sunday after the Saints game and before the Saints game. So the news is now is that most likely 95%. Did you hear what John said? No player who was listed as doubtful played on Sunday. So it's Minshew. I think it makes it more of a fist fight. Okay? Here's where you could get in trouble if you're the Eagles, the coaching staff. Remember what I told you prior to John coming on? What was the big thing that we talked about that I still think that Nick Sirianni has to work on? What is it? Patience. The Eagles go into this game with a lot of stress. Saints have nothing to lose. They have nothing to lose. They're playing with house money. What a better way to save their season to knock off a 13-2 team. That's how it's being positioned in New Orleans right now. Hey, we haven't had the best year, especially Kamara. 700 some odd yards, missed a couple games this year. He's been pretty decent in pass receiving, but he has not had an Alvin Kamara year. You imagine coming away from this game with 150 yards in total offense if you're Alvin Kamara? Then you kind of like put some juice back into the front office with Mickey Loomis, the general manager, and you go, get me a quarterback. I'll put those big numbers up like I did with Breeze. Cam Jordan's playing. Hey, guess what? I'm still here. Again, I'm not trying to throw fear into it. I'm throwing reality into it. And I'm telling you what these guys are thinking and what these guys are probably pitching to one another. You see, sometimes you know what you got to do? You got to be Muhammad Ali. You know the great thing about Ali? Everyone used to always, and get this, what used to be so great about playing at the University of Miami, Jimmy Johnson would bring in guys like Julio Cesar Chavez, John the Beast Mugabe, Muhammad Ali. He'd bring in Angelo Dundee. And Ali would sit and talk to us. And I think it was Alonzo Highsmith. He asked him, he goes, man, why'd you talk so much prior to fights? You know what Ali admitted to us? He was talking himself into the win. He was talking himself into the win. What he did against Liston, what he did, you notice he talked the most against who? Frazier, Foreman, and Liston. Those were the 3 fighters he admitted to us that he thought would give him the biggest battles. Liston, Frazier, Thriller in Manila, the 3 trilogy fights were iconic. He said, the more I talked, the more I had to talk myself into it. Nobody gave him a shot against George Foreman. He was 32 years old. He had not been the heavyweight champion since 1967. He had been beaten by Frazier in the earlier fight. He talked himself into it. By the time the fight came, there was no way George Foreman was going to beat him. No way. That's what you do as an athlete. You play the game all week in your mind. There's no way this guy's beating me. That's maybe sometimes Xander goes, Sills always talks in words like never, not happen. It's because probably I trained myself. Every time I was playing against somebody, that's not happening. That's not going to ever happen. This is never going to happen. That won't come down like that. Athletes think like this. How many, you go like this, I can't believe that guy upset that guy. Talked himself into it. Who played the tougher schedule, the 49ers or the Eagles? Probably San Fran. Probably San Fran. By the way, one thing about that 85 Bears team, I think they gave up a total of 6 or 9 points in all 4 or all 3, I think, of the postseason games. Nobody will ever pull that accomplishment off. I forget what it was. Here, let me. I think that Bears team, and get this, it was against Montana, and I think the Rams. It was an insane number. It was like 6 points. How many playoff points did the Bears give up in the 85 playoffs? It was 10. 10 points in 3 games. I don't know. You're going to win pretty much every game you're in. It was 10 points. They gave up. That Bears team was insane. Lucius, appreciate it. Thank you. Honestly, not by my... I hated the postseason. Them Bears were so dominant. Dude, they were just tremendous. They were tremendous. Okay. How does it change now that Jalen is not starting most likely against the Saints? He's listed as doubtful. No player that's been listed as doubtful in the NFL this year has played. By the way, I want to do it now. Jalen Hurts' regular season is over. Let's take a look at Jalen Hurts. His regular season is officially over. Okay? I believe they're going to win and rest him. You know the injury that he has? Ben Roethlisberger had the same injury. He was out 3 weeks. So it kind of makes sense. Look at Maniac. That's a shame. He would have hit 4K. Dual threat won't hit 4K. You've got to admit it, Maniac. I was right. You said he would have. I said he would never. But Sills, he would have. No. Dual threat misses games. Unless you're the guy in Buffalo. Ikun goes, you know he would have. I don't know that. I talk in facts. But I do want to do this. Let's take a look at that. I want to take a look at Jalen Hurts' 2022 season. And I'm going to put a price tag on it. Hit the like button. Let's do that next. Also, don't forget, Week 17 of the National Football League, some tremendous bowl games. I'm also going to ask you MVPs as we're getting closer to the end of the year. MVPs of the team. We're going to do that next. Do me a favor, please. Hit the like button, hour 2. Keep it here on the National Football Show.